మాకేమో 30 అన్నారు, 16 అన్నారు, 20 అన్నారు. వాళ్ళు సుధాకర్ ఓకే.
ఇక్కడ చేసి సాధారణ ఇక్కడ ఏం చేయాలి?
reverse. So in a previous application, we maintain the data in a cookie we maintained. The same application, now we are storing the data in a session. Okay. Session.set attribute. You had to specify the key and we had to specify the value. The same keys we will specify. The username, password, email. So request.get parameter of uname, password, mobile number and email. Okay. So we stored the data in a session, we stored the data. Okay, there. This is registration page, right? Next one is what? Login. In login process servlet, previously we are reading the data from the cookies. Previously, we are reading the data from cookies, we are reading the data because we store the data in a cookie, right? Now we are not stored the data in cookie, we store the data in a session, we store the data. So I commented this logic. So now the data is available in a session. So first get the session. Session is equals to your request object dot get session is a method. The session object dot, what is the method name? One second. Previously we used cookies. The session object dot session or HTTP session? HTTP session. Session is equals to request object dot get session. Now session object dot get attribute. You had to specify the key. What is the key we specified for username? The login servlet or login process. The registration process. We store the data in a session, we store the data. Okay, username and password. Now in the login process, get the username and password. So request.get attribute of username and request.get attribute of password. So we declared two string variables we already declared. String, one is name from cookie and name from password from cookie. Do one thing, name from session and the password from session. So name from session is equals to session.get attribute and name from password from session is equal to session.get attribute. So we are getting an exception here. The exception is the return type of this get attribute is the object. What is the return type? Object is the return type, but we are storing that one into one string variable, right? It is asking just you have to cast it to string, because the return type of this return type is what? It's an object type. We are converting that object into string format by adding this type casting. Okay, that's it. So here we have to check if the user given name is equals with the name from session, the password is equals with the password from sessions. So forward to main page. I think was just in a previous example, in place of cookies, we used sessions. That's it. Okay. So student app or Harish baby? Harish baby. So run on server. So app is installed. When you give the URL /main, you will get the home page. You will get. One second. So what is the URL? We have to give /main. Okay, you get the home page. You will get. So here select which one? Registration. Anyone of you knows this password, username and password? 114 1A0 557. So select registration. You get the registration page. So give the user. So let's take again. Username is Shiva. I given the username. Let's give the password. Data. Given some credentials. When you select register button, store the data into session. So now, give the credentials here. What is the username and what is the password? Shiva is the username I given. The password is what? Shrika. Select login. So welcome to AP SST. So you can maintain the data either in session you can maintain the data, or in a cookie we can maintain the data. Okay. So that is session tracking in servlets. You can maintain the data either in cookies or in sessions. So once cookies is going to be removed, once if you close your browser, or once if you clear your history, the cookies data is going to be removed. Even sessions also automatically can invalidate the session. For example, in the web.xml file, open webinf web.xml file. For example, for this servlet, somewhere for example, I specified session config session time dot is equals to what? 1 minute I specified. Meaning, if user is not interacted with the system for 1 minute, automatically the session is going to be expired. Okay, so automatically whatever the data you are having in the session, everything is going to be expired for 1 minute. Okay, generally this cookies concept and sessions concept is used to maintain some data in your application. For example, if you take your Gmail page, or let us take if you take your Facebook pages, first time you will give login credentials. Then after that, you can navigate to n number of pages. In each and every page, you need to give your login credentials. Correct or not? Where they will store that login credentials? Either they will store in either cookies or in a sessions they will maintain the data. Okay. So this is sessions. The next topic in servlets, that is filters. So what is the next concept? The last concept in servlets, that is filters concept. Filter concept. Filter is used to perform the pre and post operations filter is used to perform pre and post operations for the servlet. Filter is used to perform the pre and post operations for the servlet. Okay. Next, to create a filter, we had to provide the implementation for filter interface. To create a filter, we had to provide the implementation for what? The filter interface. Have you seen cigarettes? Cigarette boss. Normal cigarette, tage cigarette. Cigarette contains a filter. Do you know cigarette contains what? It contains a filter. What is the need of that filter? A filter లేదనుకోండి డైరెక్ట్ గా టొబాకో కంటెంట్ లోపలికి వెళ్ళిపోతుంది. కరెక్ట్ ఆర్ నాట్? ఓకే, సో దట్ ఆ ఫిల్టర్ ఏంటంటే ఆ అన్నెసరీ టొబాకో కంటెంట్ ని లోపలికి పోనీయకుండా ఫిల్టర్ చేస్తుంది. కరెక్ట్ ఆర్ నాట్? హియర్ ఆల్సో ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ I created a project was. The project contains, imagine 100 screens. Before going to start each and every page, for example, user is selected a login button or user is selected a registration button. So before going to invoke any servlet, I want to perform some pre operations, or after completion of servlet, I want to perform some post operations. Like when user is selected registration, first I want to check whether the user is having an internet connection or not. Correct or not? If internet connection is there, then only display a page. If internet connection is not there, then display a message to user, boss, you don't have internet connection. So when you have to write that logic, you don't have an internet connection, please enable the internet. This is a common logic for each and every servlet or not? This is a common logic for each and every servlet. Before going to invoke the servlet, I have to check a internet connection. So this filter concept, which is used to perform the pre operations or the post operations before going to invoke a servlet or after completion of the servlet. If you want to do any operations, you can write in the filters. Okay, So what is our first step to create a filter? We had to create one class which implements what? The filter interface. So in our previous project, in the same project, we created almost 5-6 servlet classes created. Java resources. We created login servlet, login process, login servlet, main servlet, registration process, and registration servlet. We created total 5 servlets we created. So before going to invoke any one of the servlet, I want to perform some pre-operations. I want to perform some post operations I want to perform. So we had to create what? A filter we had to create. So what is the first step to create a filter? We had to create one class. Let us take I given my filter. We created a class called my filter. So what is the first step? This class should implement what? Implements filter interface. See, this filter is available in different places. org.sun.org Apache and directory system, login, service Jsp. In a lot of places this filter is available. But you have to provide the implementation for which interface? JavaX.servlet interface filter. So it's an interface, right? Obvious interface contains what? Abstract methods. See, what are the methods, abstract methods in the filter interface? So add unimplemented methods. It contains 3 abstract methods. What are the 3 abstract methods? Init, do filter, and destroy method. Okay, easily you can understand the init method and the destroy method. Okay, the main important method is the do filter method. In this do filter method, I am writing one statement: system.out.println. Let us take before invoking servlet. Before invoking what? The servlet. So what is the second parameter for this one? The second parameter for do filter method, filter chain, right? Filter chain. In place of arg2, just for my naming convention, we rename to chain. So here, give a method chain dot. There is a method called do filter is a method. We have to pass 2 parameters for this one: the request object and the response object. Already, this method is taking already 2 parameters as input. One is servlet request and servlet response. We'll specify 2 objects as a response. Then after that, system.out.println after invoking servlet. Meaning before going to invoke the servlet, then this is called before invoking the servlet. For each and every servlet, before going to invoke the servlet, which statement it will print? Before invoking servlet it will print. Next it will call what? Chain.do filter, the servlet, whatever the servlet class you specified, the servlet class will call. Then after that, after invoking the servlet, you will get what? After invoking the servlet. Nothing goes. If you want to perform any pre-operations, before invoking the servlet, right here, before this chain.do filter method. After invoking the servlet, if you want to perform any operations, right after chain.do filter. Okay. So next we have to configure this filter in the web.xml. Open the web.xml file. Same like servlet, we had to configure the filter also. We had to configure in the web.xml. So filter, you had to specify what is the filter class name, filter name, and filter class. Okay, so you can give any name. Let us take my filter. Next, the class name is, what is the class name? My filter is the class name. Next, same like servlet, you have to specify mapping also. We have to specify filter mapping. what is the filter name and what is the URL pattern. So filter name is my filter. Okay, this URL pattern is important. For which servlet, so before calling which servlet, you want to call this filter. For that servlet as well as for the filter also, we had to specify the same URL. Are you understand? అంటే మీరు ఏ సర్వ్లెట్ ని కాల్ చేసే కంటే ముందు ఫిల్టర్ ఇన్వోక్ చేయాలనుకున్నారో ఆ సర్వ్లెట్ యొక్క యూఆర్ఎల్ యాజ్ వెల్ యాజ్ ద ఫిల్టర్ యూఆర్ఎల్ రెండు సేమ్ స్పెసిఫై చేయాలి. ఓకే, ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ ఈ మెయిన్ సర్వ్లెట్ ఉంది కదా మనకి. సో బిఫోర్ గోయింగ్ టు ఇన్వోక్ దిస్ మెయిన్ సర్వ్లెట్, లెట్ us take I want to invoke the filter I want to invoke. What is the name we specified for this main servlet? What is the name we specified for the main servlet? What is the URL we specified? /main. So we'll specify the same URL here. So before going to invoke this main servlet, first filter will invoke, then after that servlet will invoke. Okay, so we'll test. So run as Android, sorry, run on server. This is the console, right? To invoke the main screen, what is the URL you have to specify? What is the URL you have to specify? /main. But see here we got before invoking servlet and after invoking servlet. Before going to display this servlet, first we got before invoking servlet. After the servlet is displayed, then after that we got after invoking servlet. Okay, so let us take. I want to do this one for each and every servlet. I don't want to restrict only for one servlet class. I don't want to restrict for only one servlet class. For each and every servlet class, before going to invoke the servlet, I want to perform some preconditions. After invoking the servlet, I want to perform some post conditions I want to perform. Just simply in place of this /login, I specified start, meaning all. For whatever it may be, you can give any URL. Before going to invoke that servlet, first this filter class will invoke. Okay, so we'll test filter. Sorry, not here. Where you have to configure the filter mapping, you have to configure in place of this /main, specify star. So the request from any servlet you can call servlet. For example, I selected login. So when you select login, before invoking servlet and after invoking servlet. For example, I am selecting this home before invoking servlet and after invoking servlet. before going to invoke any servlet, filter is calling or not? Filter is calling. Okay. So of course, right now I think you are not finding any great advantages with this filter concept. But once if you start project, so at that time you'll find a requirement of using this filter concept. Before going to invoke any servlet, if you want to perform any pre-operations, we use this filters concept. Okay. Best example I told you, right? Before going to invoke a servlet, I want to check the user is having an internet connection or not. Okay. So where you have to write that logic in each and every servlet, it's difficult or not. Okay. And one more thing, for example, initially when user is login, I store the data in the session. So before going to invoke each and every servlet, I want to get whether the user credentials are there in the session or not. Where you have to write that logic. That logic also we have to write in a filters. We have to write the logic. Okay. So filters, which is used to perform the pre-operations and the post-operations in the servlets. Just we have to provide the implementation for a filter interface, which contains 3 methods: init, destroy, and do filter. In this do filter method, so chain.do filter. Before going to call this chain, if you want to perform any pre-operations, write before this chain.do filter method. So after this chain.do filter, this is post operations. This is pre-operations and the post operations. Okay. So this is filters concept in servlets. Okay. So I hope this much knowledge is enough in servlets. Okay. In servlets, we are having few disadvantages. The few disadvantages are when you make some changes, every time we have to redeploy the page, correct or not? Every time we have to redeploy the application in the server. That is one thing. And servlets is not suitable for dynamic web pages. Servlet is not suitable for dynamic web pages. For example, in the companies, let us take, if we take web application, 2 people are working on with this web application. One is the designer will work, another one is the programmer will work. Designer, the web designer, he will design the web pages. Okay. For example, if you give this servlet code for the designer, he is a designer, right? He don't know all this servlet code and all, correct or not? The designer don't know this servlet concept, this Java and everything, right? So to avoid all these problems, next we have a concept called JSP. JSP is termed as Java Server Pages. So very simple. Everything like you can write in a tags format. You can write in JSPs. Okay. Mainly in JSPs, we are having 3 types of tags. Internally, JSP is also working on servlet only. Internally, JSP is also working on what? Servlets only. Okay. So 3 types of tags we are having. One is Scriptlet tag, directive tags, and action tags. Scriptlet tags, directive tags, and the action tags. Scriptlet, directive, and the action tags. Okay. So if you know these 3 types of tags, we can close JSP also. Okay. So what is the first one? Scriptlet tags. So in this Scriptlet tags, mainly we are having a Scriptlet tag, declaration tag, and the expression tag. Scriptlet, declaration, and the expression tag. Script tag is represented by using this. Scriptlet tag is represented by using this, and the declaration tag is represented what is the last one? Expression tag. I think a small doubt whether it's scriptlet, declaration, and expression tags. First scriptlet tag is equals, the first scriptlet tag is equals to your service method. Generally we write service method, right? We write service method in the servlet. This scriptlet tag is equals to servlet. Okay, the servlet service method, the servlet service method. And if you have any initializations in your program, if you have any initializations, perform that initializations in the declaration tag. Expression tag, which is used to get the value. Expression tag, which is used to get the value of some particular, for example, you declared one variable in the declaration tag. If you want to get that value, so then you can use expression tag. Okay, so we'll see already in the existing project, already in our existing project, in place of servlets, we'll do one thing. We use JSP. We use, okay, scriptlet, declaration, and the expression tags. So we'll start from registration process. In this registration process, actually we created a servlet. We created what? We created one servlet. In that servlet, generally what we are doing in the service method, we are getting the data from the user, and we are storing the data into session. We are storing the data into session. We store the data. Then after that, we forwarding that one to login page. Correct or not? What is performing the registration? We are getting the data from the user. We stored the data in the session. We stored the data. Then after that, we forwarded that one to login. Correct? So we'll do one thing. In place of this registration, registration process, we'll create a Jsp file. We'll create a Jsp file. So registration process. So we'll create a JSP. If you want to create a JSP, select web content. Select web content. So now create one JSP file. Create. Let's take registration process.jsp. Okay, registration process JSP. By default, you'll get this one. I removed the entire code. I removed. Okay, except this. Even if you want to remove, you can remove this one also. So now here I want to create one. This method is equals to what? This tag is equals to the service tag, right? So whatever the logic you return in the registration, whatever the logic written in the registration process service method, you can write here. So copy this, put the logic in the registration process. Here you'll get an exception, that is session. Here session is a built-in object here. Session is what? Session, meaning create any object for the session. You need to create any object for the session. We are having 9 built-in objects we are having. Slowly we'll see one after another. We are having how many built-in objects? 9 built-in objects in the JSP. One of the built-in object is session. Session is one built-in object. Then after that, request is also one built-in object. In place of service method, we are getting 2 parameters, the servlet request and the servlet response. So observe here in this tag, where is request object, where is response object? There is no any parameters, right? There is no input parameter. So this request, response, So all these are the built-in objects in JSP, meaning you don't need to create any object here. You don't need to create any object for the session. See, the session.set attribute, where it is showing an error, here it is not showing an error because it's a built-in object. Where it is giving an error? Request. So you have to specify request is also one of the built-in object in JSP. Request is also one of the built-in object in JSP. In place of this REQ, you have to specify the full name. You have to specify request. So now it is equals to the service. It is equals to the service method of your servlet. So now previously we forward to registration process servlet, we forward, right? Now in place of the registration process servlet, we will forward to this JSP page, we will forward. Okay. Where you have to write this one? From where you are forwarding to this registration process? In the registration button. The registration.html button. When user is selected register button, when user is selected what? Register button, we are forwarding to one URL. What is that one? Registration process we are forwarding. Now in place of that registration process, actually it's the URL, right? This URL we configured in web.xml. This URL we configured in the web.xml. The request from this URL, it is forwarding to which servlet? Registration process servlet it is forwarding. Now, don't forward this registration process servlet. We created on JSP file, we created forward to that registration process JSP file. Meaning in place of this form action, what you have to specify? The JSP file name you have to specify. What is the JSP file name? Registration process dot JSP. Now there is no servlet. Directly we are forwarding from HTML file to the JSP file we are forwarding. Okay. So run on server. So select registrations. Select registration. So give the credentials. Shrikant given. Joe. Okay. Select register Shrikant and JOE a given password. Select register. Which page it will forward? See, previously it is forwarded to registration process servlet. Now it is forwarded to which page? Registration process.jsp it is forwarded. We got these things: username, password, date of birth, and all the details. And after that, it is forwarded to which page? Login page. It is forwarded. Previously, it is forwarded the data to registration process. Now it is forwarded to what? Registration process.jsp file. So creating a JSP file is very simple than the Servlet or not? How many lines of logic you written? You need to write any class, or you need to write any interfaces. You need to provide the implementation for any interfaces. It's very simple. Just you have to open one scriptlet tag, that's it. Now this code anyone can understand. Even a designer also can understand. Even a designer also can understand this code. Okay? Because Java logic very less, right? Java logic is very less here. Next. If you want to check, you can test here. Let's take name I given Srikanth, password I given. These two details are stored in the session. I think session is invalidated because we specified, right? We specified in the web.xml file what is the max duration for the session. Session config we specified 1 minute, meaning if there is no user interaction for 1 minute, automatically the session is going to be expired. That's why still it is loading, because the session is expired. There is no data. Okay. Select register. It is forwarded to registration page. It is forwarded registration process.jsp page, and give the login credentials what you specified. So welcome to AP SSDC. So previously we stored the data into session object. In the registration process Servlet we stored the data. Okay. Now we store now the same thing we written in a JSP page we return. Okay. So for example, if you take login Servlet, login process Servlet, login process Servlet. So this is a logic written. This is a logic written in the login process. This is the logic written in the login process, which is used to get the data from the session. What is the logic written in this? What is the logic written here? Get the data from the session and get the data from the user. Get the data from session and get the data from the user. If user given value and the value from session, and user given password and value from session both are same, then we are forwarding to which page? The main page we are forwarding. So now same thing. Now the same logic I want to write in a JSP file. I want to write the logic. This same logic I want to write what? In a JSP file I want to write the logic. Okay. So in JSP we are having other two tags, right? Apart from scriptlet tag, we are having two other tags. What are the two tags? Declaration tag and the expression tag. We'll do one thing. In this login process JSP, we'll create a JSP file called login process. In that JSP file, these two are the variables, right? We had these two variables will initialize in the declaration tag. These two variables will initialize in will this one also will initialize in the declarative tag. So here we'll create a new JSP file. We'll create in place of this servlet. I want to create one JSP file. I want to create a JSP file. Let us take login process.jsp. In place of login process, in place login process servlet. Now I created a JSP file. I created. You can remove this entire logic. Okay. What is the next one? If you have any initializations, perform that initializations in the declaration tag. Small change. Just change that one to I think is equals to also same thing. The declaration tag and the expression tag. Okay. So here I want to declare some variables. I want to declare here. I want to declare the variables. The login process. These are the variables, right? Name, the password, and put all these variables in the login process.jsp. Put here string name from session and the password from session. It's a declaration. It's a declarative tag, right? In the declarative tag, nothing will get. If you take request.get parameter, request is a method of service method, right? Request is a method of service or not? The service method will get two parameters: request object and the response object. In the declarative tag, if you specify here, nothing you will get. Request object you will get, null you will get. Request object what you will get? Null you will get here. So we'll do one thing. Just we'll initialize. These two things also will initialize here. What are the two things? One is the name and another one is password. In the scriptlet tag means nothing but equals to your service method. In this scriptlet tag, get the two things: name and what is the next one? Password. So your name is equals to request.get parameter request is an built-in object, right? You have to specify the full form. You have to specify the full name. You have to specify request.get parameter and the request.get parameter of password. Okay. So we got we declared in the declaration. We initialize value in scriptlet tag. We initialize the value. Okay. What is the next logic? The login process. We got two values from the user. We got the two values. Next, we had to get the values from the session, right? We had to get the values from the session. We had to get the values. Login process. So we had to get the values from the session. Copy this logic. Put the logic in the login process.jsp. So here, you need to create a HTTP session object. You need to create because session is one of the built-in objects. So no need to create here. Session is one of the built-in object. No need to create a session. Got the session.get attributes. So bracket is extra. So here we have to use what? Request and the response. Okay. So whatever the logic written in the login process servlet, the same logic written in a JSP file we return. Okay. So next, where we had to change? We had to change in the login XML file. We had to change. We had to change in the login HTML file. Previously, when you select login button, We are forwarding to one URL. What is that URL? Login process URL we are forwarding. Now we have to forward to which page? Login process.jsp page we have to forward. Login process.jsp. Okay. So run as server. So registration. Select register. So it will forward to registration process.jsp. Observe the URL. It is forwarded to what? Registration process.jsp. Okay. Next, here we have to give what is the username and password given. Let's take Joe is a username I given and she is a password I given. And see, when you select login button, previously it is forwarding to one servlet, it is forwarding. Now it is going to forward to what? One JSP file it is going to forward. What is the JSP file name? Login process.jsp. We got an exception. What is the exception? Get output stream has already been called for this response. Meaning? It is forwarded the credentials to login.jsp. The username is equals to Joe and password is Sri. Java.lang.illegal set exception. Open this login process.jsp. Web.xml. Any mistake was? Second. Request.get parameter of username, then password. From session we got the values. myfilter.java.doFilter. Where is our class name? Just I commented the filter I commented. Registration is completed. So writing SOP statements. Before request dispatcher and after request dispatcher. Same URL I'm calling. You'll observe in the console what is the message you will get. Before request dispatcher we got, and after request dispatcher also we got. Then where we are getting exception? I think in the main servlet we are getting an exception. Not in this servlet, we are getting an exception at the main servlet. Throw exception java.lang.illegal static exception. as per my expectation, we are not getting any exception in this servlet. We are forwarding to which servlet? Main servlet we are forwarding, right? So I think here we are getting an exception. I think. Main servlet. Do one thing. This main servlet will convert to JSP page. Will convert. Okay. So we'll convert this main servlet also will convert. The JSP file will convert new JSP file. Let us take main.jsp. Any replace option? Small change. This request is also changing. RET. Better. Request. The login process.jsp. So in place of this slash main, forward which JSP file? Forward to main.jsp file. It's mandatory to specify slash. Register. where we are getting exception about. Everything is perfect. An idea on the JSP? If you get the clear description on, you can easily tell where is the problem. Navigate అవ్వట్లేదు. నాట్ ఈక్వల్స్ పెట్టి ట్రై చేద్దామంట. Servlet.jsp. Generally, if you want to write some data on the browser, generally what you will take in case of Servlet? In case of Servlet, how to write the data in a browser? Print writer object will create, right? But here in JSP, directly we have a method called out. What is the method name? Out is a method. Directly you can call out.println. Some error in page or something. If user credentials are valid, it will forward to main. If user credentials are not valid, forward to error in error page.jsp. So we have to write this logic, right? In the login process, if user credentials are not valid, forward to which page? In place of main.jsp, forward to error.jsp. Main.jsp registration. Okay, you'll see this part. We have one more tag is there. Scriptlet tag, declarative tag, and what is another one? Expression tag. Expression tag which is used to print a value. Expression tag which is used to print a value. For example, I'll create a dummy JSP file. I'll create just for demonstrating that expression tag, scriptlet tag, and the declarative tag. So I'm creating one JSP file. I'm creating the web content. Create one new JSP file. Let us take test.jsp. Test.jsp. So here, so what is the first tag? Let's say it's a declaration tag. Okay, we'll declare some we'll declare some value here. Let us take I declared int x is equals to 30. I declared one variable int x is equals to what? 30. I declared one value. So once if you declare one variable in the declarative tag, you can access anywhere in the program. I mean you can access anywhere in the JSP file. So for example, in the scriptlet tag, if you want to print anything on the browser, you don't need to create any. Previously in case of Servlet, if you want to write anything on the browser, we'll create for print writer, we'll create an object, right? So here you don't need to create any print writer object. Directly you can use this out object directly you can use. Out dot, what is the method name? Out dot println. For example, your value is, so I want to print the value. Can I write x? Out dot println of x. So that's why we got there is no any exception here. Otherwise you'll get an exception, right? Directly if you write x, you'll get an exception. So now there is no any exception because of it's a global declaration. To declare any variable in the declarative tag, you can access anywhere in the program. So what is the JSP file name we created? Test.jsp. So you got value is what? 30, we got the value. You can get the value like this, or by using expression tag also you can get the value. For example here, in the test.jsp, if you want to get the value, if you want to get the x value here, you can close the scriptlet tag here. X value is plus next. I need a value, right? So you can use expression tag. You can use expression tag of x. Okay. So again in the scriptlet tag, value is what is the file name? Test.jsp. But only 30 we got. So this expression tag we can use, which is used to get the value. In the declarative tag, whatever the value you initialize, if you want to get the value outside the, if you want to get that value outside the scriptlet tag, directly you can use the expression tag, which is used to print the values. Okay. Inside scriptlet tag, directly you can use X to get a value. For example, outside the scriptlet tag, if I write directly X, the compiler will accept. Come on, boss. Compiler will accept. If you write like this, if you run the application, what you will get? In place of 30, what it will print, it will print X, it will print. It will not print the 30. Okay. So if you want to print the value, if you want to print, you can use this expression tag, you can use to get the value. Okay. So this is scriptlet tag, expression tag, and the declarative tag. Okay. So try to explore more on these three tags. There are n number of articles and blogs are there for this JSPs and servlets. If you are having interest, there are n number of ways are there. Okay, and we'll see that one why you are getting that exception. But test this scriptlet tags, this declarative, independently test this one, or if you are interested, integrate in the same application, test. Anyway, our registration process is working fine. We converted that one to the servlet. We converted to what? JSP we converted. Okay, and better use JSPs than the servlets. Of course, why we discuss servlets? Because internally JSP is also using what? Servlet only. For example, directly if I write this scriptlet tag directly, if I write, you will not understand. But you know already about service method, right? This scriptlet tag is equals to the service method in the servlet. Internally, the JSP is also using what? The servlets. Okay. So try to explore more this JSP. In our next class, we'll complete the remaining two tags, the directive tags and action tags. And in JSP, we are having total nine built-in objects we are having. Up to now, we discussed only three things we discussed: request, response. We used request object, we used response object, we used session object, we used next out object also we used. So 4 built-in objects are completed. Remaining 5 built-in objects are remaining. Okay. So if you have a time, tomorrow we'll complete this JSP. From day after tomorrow onwards, we'll start. Android will start next 4 to 5 sessions. Okay. Thank you.